Hello and welcome to Let's See It with me, Rebecca Tamwin, and her, Kiva Murphy.
Hello.
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 Today we are talking about inspiration.
Yeah. Inspiration is kind of everything and everywhere.
Yeah.
All at once.
All the time.
Mm.
All the things, all the time, everywhere.
Yeah, right.
Inspired. So Kiva, what comes to mind immediately when I say the word inspiration?
A good question. I think maybe freedom is what comes to mind.
Ooh.
Yeah, I think I am very lucky in the way that I've set up my life and the way I live my life that I get to be inspired and also follow that inspiration. I think one part of inspiration is getting it, seeing it, but then actually being able to have that follow through is a different thing. So you can think of all the paintings in the world, but if you never actually get to put paint to canvas, you don't have that realization of the inspiration and then that growth and all that. So I'm lucky that I do get to be inspired by other people, by myself, by other things that I see all the time, and also go through with that. But I think that's a huge sense of freedom. I think a lot of people are stuck in their jobs, lives, countries, houses, whatever it might be, and they feel really uninspired by things. And maybe it's because everything is the same. So if you go to the same place, the same people, the same job, it's very hard to find that inspiration in there because there's no new input, no new information. So I think freedom in terms of allowing things to flow.
That's a very interesting answer. I didn't expect you to say that, but you're absolutely right. If you're doing the same thing and you're not having that new input and you're not allowing, you're not set up in a way that gives you that freedom, then inspiration's hard to find. And it's kind of very aspirational thing. Like, you'll get inspired by your life. That can be very tough if you
Quite
feel
judgmental if you're not.
Yeah.
You're like, go on, go get inspired.
I'm like, by what? By my
From whom? Like,
yeah. And it's that thing of that can feel very like heavily pressured to say, oh, just go find inspiration in your day to day. See the small things, see the joy, that's a big ask. And it's something that doesn't often come naturally to be inspired by what's around you. Because you can be inspired by unbelievably dull stuff. And it can actually feed, weirdly, your creativity and your inspiration if you're given very boring things to do.
yeah,
It's one
limitation. Was it limitation breeds creation?
Yeah.
Limitation breeds creation.
Limitation breeds creativity.
No, it's something that
Limitation
rhymes.
breeds creation. That sounds good.
Yeah, limitation breeds creation.
The boredom thing is something that is an important part of divergent thinking and creative thinking. Is they've done studies where people are given a boring task. They find fascinating and interesting ways to kind of work around it, to make it faster, make it better, make it more interesting for themselves. The creativity that actually comes out of boredom is quite remarkable than someone who's given a non-boring task. It's
because you've got some part of your brain that's liberated. You're like, okay, I'm doing this menial task. Dung, 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 stamp, dung, 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 stamp.
And also you're limited. There's a limitation to it. You're kind of limited in that task. You kind of go, oh, okay, well, what about this? Or like, can we move this here? And can we do that there? And you suddenly will get much more interesting and divergent thought happening.
Yeah.
Because that is another thing that... Oh my God.
She's breaking the table.
I bumped the table. Because, I think inspiration and finding inspiration is quite a conceptual thing. It feels conceptual, that kind of like...
It's so ethereal.
I've been inspired by my muses and this sort of thing. Whereas I think the phrase for me, divergent thinking, feels more...
tangible?
Yeah, I guess it feels more tangible because it's something we can monitor a little bit more in a more scientific sort of way. Because inspiration is very much within divergent thinking. You're inspired and your thinking goes off in
lateral places. Yeah.
Exactly. It kind of explodes off. Because there's two things, divergent and convergent thinking. Convergent is you're heading in to a final solution. Like you're moving towards one point. And that is the way most adults kind of function. We're looking for the solution. We're looking for the right answer. Whereas divergent thinking is that kind of more like you have a paperclip and how many things can you think of to do with this paperclip, and your mind just goes pew 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 pew, and you just go off.
Brainstorm.
Exactly that. And in prep for this episode, I did a little bit of research again, my tiny research, mini research, Google research,
baby research,
and they found a few studies, and one of them is that children under, I think it was, I might get this wrong, but children under 5, 90% of them registered as genius in the divergent thinking spectrum. And then after they got past 5, it dropped to 50. And as you get older and older,
it
your
just
divergent
goes,
thinking disappears off. We don't encourage that skill. And it is something that isn't encouraged in our kind of day-to-day lives. And there are certain things you can do to work on that skill. And actually, weirdly, when I was researching a lot of it is performance-based stuff, or like a lot of the improv games we play.
For sure.
Encourages that muscle, encourages that kind of like association with different objects. So this makes me think of this, and this makes me think of this, and what can I do with that? And it encourages you to practice that skill, which we kind of sort of lose as we get older and older.
I think we definitely lose it, and that's why people get hired to go and do a creative brainstorming with a team that are really struggling, and people were literally getting someone from the outside to go, okay, come and help me open my brain a little bit more. Because I think what you're saying about after you're 5, when then it goes kind of declines, is we just enter into judgment, into self-criticism of going, oh, I said this, you said horse. And for whatever reason, from my context, from my point of view, you say horse and I think of stable. And I go, oh, but what if that's not? Maybe I should say horse and I should say elephant, or I should say farm, or I shoulda, meta, shema. Whatever you think of is going to be okay.
Yeah.
But I think on the broad spectrum of things, particularly with our business lives, we're like, oh, we'll keep this to this small realm. This is what's appropriate. So I'm having a beer with my friends. Someone tells a story about a horse, and I'm like, oh, I could tell a story about how I went horse riding. And we kind of keep things small because we don't want to go, imagine unicorns existed. Wouldn't it be cool? Imagine we could make tea out of the horns of whatever. And you just go off on one. And I think we generally as adults only do that when there's substance involved.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's why I think it's one of the reasons why people drink or they take drugs or they have sex, because they can kind of let go of some of that judgment and that criticism, because then you're in that post-coital, post-whatever vibe, and you're like, oh, imagine this, imagine that. And you have that free flow and you allow yourself that freedom.
Yeah. You're more playful and relaxed, and you're more like a child kind of thing.
I have a question for you. So, Rebecca, what inspires you? Big question, I know.
It's a huge question. And this is ridiculous because I know you would have going to ask me this, probably sitting down to record this pod, but I hadn't really thought about it until you asked me just then. I think people always inspire me.
Okay.
I think I'm very inspired by people. I find people fascinating. I find people's lives fascinating. Having said that, I hate reading biographies. I find them boring, most of them. But the people within my life inspire me. Like I see people do certain things, I'm like, oh, that's really cool. I love that idea. And I'll sort of take little inspirational bits from people. Like I watch, for example, you and Ella setting up big, and I'm like, those two are such boss ladies. Just like absolutely going for it with such commitment, like 100% commitment. And killing it, and that is so inspiring. I don't feel competitive with that. I don't feel like challenged as in like you're doing bad. I think, ooh, look how committed they are to this. If I commit in the same way to things that I love and am doing and can feel inspired by their commitment, then I can bring that, see that, be inspired by that, bring that into my context, into my place, into who I am, and make,
and be encouraged by it rather than feel threatened.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's a beautiful thing.
Exactly. I'm always so inspired by artists and by creatives and seeing the bravery of people sometimes. And that's one thing I find most amazing in when we do our improv classes is, of course, I'm coming from a performance context. So in a way, I'm a slight ringer for certain things. Like I'm a slight cheat in certain things, and I have some stagecraft, I have some knowledge of some
And
basics.
lots of it, yes.
And professional knowledge of that. So yeah, I am coming from a base that is a little bit, in certain areas, more advanced than some other people. But I just am so, every single time I come to a class, everybody within that class will do something that I'm just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Hey, how did you thought of that? Oh, that's a genius little physical thing you just did. And it's just fills my cup so much because I'm just being constantly inspired by all these tiny little things, these little moments that everyone's doing. And you know, not everyone comes from a performance background.
Most of them don't. Most of them
people
are
don't.
engineers, or they work in sales, or they are parents, or whatever the context is. So they have a much inspiration in general is a much less part of their lives.
Yeah, and I find it amazing. I find them getting up and doing it I find it so inspiring and so impressive and really moving. And I think that's kind of so that's why I find people and people's actions the most inspiring thing. I find that, I think, more so I'm going to say than kind of art or something like that. I find the day-to-day a bit more inspiring sometimes, but I think that's quite a nice place to sit, because then I invest in the people around me a bit more than, say, books or films that inspire me. And yeah, I enjoy books and films and that sort of stuff, and I'm inspired by certain actors' performances, but it often tends to be live or sort of face-to-face stuff that inspires me the most. Recorded media and no, not the podcast.
Like podcasts?
Like podcasts. Recorded media and film, TV, that sort of thing are a wonderful outlet, and they can feel very cathartic, and they can feel very beautiful and a very safe way to express and feel kind of emotions, and I love them. But I don't always feel inspired. It doesn't necessarily inspire me to do something.
Maybe there's like the call to action inspiration.
Yeah.
I think there's a difference between inspiration and aspiration.
Yeah.
I think a lot of Instagram, TikTok, these kind of things is like, oh, I should be inspired to be an influencer. I mean, the word influencer is like, I will influence you. I should inspire you to buy this, do this, eat this, dance like this, whatever it might be. But I feel like that's much more aspirational, and it's kind of sticking this thing of like, you should be like me. And therefore it can feel really triggering and really like, oh, but I don't look like that, and my thighs don't look like that. I don't have that money to buy that watch, that house, that handbag, whatever it might be. So the idea of aspirational, it's good to have a goal and to have a mentor and to be like, oh, I aspire to be like this thing, but I think it really very easily falls into capitalism. So I wish I was thinner so that I could buy that dress and look great like said person. Whereas inspirational and inspiration, I think it's a different thing. And I think it is more of a call to action. And it's like, oh, I've seen this and it inspires me to do this. So there's much more action involved in that. And I think there's not that sense of jealousy so much of like, I want to be there, and I'm what's the other word like jealousy I'm looking for?
Envy.
That's the one. Envy. Thank you. I was picturing green, the green girl from Inside Us.
Oh yeah.
Inside Out.
Inside Out.
But yeah, I think there's that thing. I think what you said about big was very sweet, and you're like, okay, that encourages me and makes me kind of feel more powerful and feel more able to go and do something.
Yeah.
And to use that inspiration.
Yeah, to see your friends succeed or see your friends be brilliant at something, or even just go for it. You go, wow, I mean, oh gosh, they're going for it. Like, let's take that energy, the kind of thing I see and I'm so impressed by. I'm like, well, I'll take a little bit of inspiration from that, and I'll go and see if I can bring that energy to my business and to what I'm doing, or to my creative projects and things like that, and see what happens. I think it's like very nice to take little bits of, oh, they did that, that's so cool. Then I can maybe take a bit of that in my own flavour, in my own way. And I think that's the thing. It's not a carbon copy. Someone's done something and it triggers me to go, I could use it like this.
Yeah. Be inspired, copy, and then you will always do it differently.
Of course.
If someone says, "Oh, look over there," and then you're like, "Oh, I could also use that sentence," you will say it in a different way. It
Mm-hmm.
will come out differently. The person will respond differently. It will be different.
Yes. I think we worry that, like, oh, I can't steal it. I'm stealing it from them, or I'm kind of like taking it and you know, it's theirs, now it's mine. It's like, no,
Mm,
everybody,
it's all just one big hive global mind.
yes,
Yeah.
the hive mind, and like using inspiration from all the different places you can find it, I think is a very important thing.
Mm.
But in kind of the divergent thinking thing, it's like it's that crystallization of this thing, so whatever it is, say like this mug makes me think of mornings, or it makes me think of drinking, it makes me
Mhm.
think of being thirsty, it makes me think of, and then you just go on and on and on and
Mm.
on, and it's that little linking one to the next to the next. And there's been a big rise in chat about divergent thinking because it is a skill that is lacking in the workforce, really.
Mm.
Because we can get very stuck, as we said, in trying to find a solution rather than expanding out and finding what's right, what's wrong, what's not working. All the kind of thoughts just all piling in.
But there's a moment for both. There's
Yes.
moments where you need to like, okay, we have
What's the
enough
solution?
inspiration. What's the solution? What do we take all of these things on the table and where do we go with that?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's a big or a small thing, I think this kind of these big words like aspiration, inspiration that we're speaking about can feel quite massive to
Yes.
take on board. Inspiration doesn't have to mean going like write an opera. It can also be like, oh, I'm inspired. My friend Jenny, for example, is wonderful at making a routine. And she's so good at having a routine and sticking to it and having a food planning routine and meal prep. And I'm like, oh, I'm inspired by that meal prep to go and do that.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't mean I have to go and do a massive thing. Like just this little small thing going, oh, maybe I can just harness a little bit of that inspiration that she's got and bring it into my life.
A little bit of that energy. It's exactly that. I read an article saying the Pixar rules of storytelling. And one thing is when they're stuck, they make a list of all the things that definitely wouldn't happen.
Great.
And they just go like, right, we've got writer's block. So basically, what's definitely not going to happen next? And they just write and write and write and write and write. And it often solves the problem because it shows the path, because you're kind of allowing the brain to not go like, what's next? You go, well, what's not next?
Yeah.
All of these things.
Unlocks all of this other stuff.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it just is a really beautiful sort of technique to kind of get that all moving.
Mm.
And I also found when it was like creative thinking and then convergent thinking, one of the things that came up again and again is yes and.
Mama.
Yeah, it came up so much, like play and yes and practicing all of those kind of skills.
For sure.
So improv is definitely a way to get that muscle going.
I mean, it is huge. It's all based on that. The whole idea of like, yeah, if you want to write a book and you want to be inspired by yourself to write a book, wonderful. But imagine if you wrote that book between 5 people. And yes, there will be conflict and there will be clashes of interest. There will be clashes of interest? That's in a sentence.
Yeah.
Conflict of interest.
Conflicts.
There will be conflict of interest. But we will get to a book that we could never have created on our own. I mean, improv is the same thing with any kind of creation. If you just allow all of those inspiration, if you kind of take off that hat of, is this right, is this correct, and just let it all accept everything, then imagine where you could go.
Yeah.
And I'm very lucky that I get to watch people step into what we call the improv void all the time of like, I don't know what's next. I'm just going to step into this unknown and go, okay, what's out there? And you will, it's like you will certainly surprise yourself and surprise your partner and therefore inspire your partner, and then they will add something to it. I thought we could just do a quick thing. I had an idea.
Course.
Oh, she's put her tea down. She's taking it seriously.
Taking it very seriously. Okay,
Just
ready.
felt like the right moment. There are thousands of exercises about this, but I thought a very simple one that you can do is, I mean, one you mentioned earlier, actually, this idea of makes me think of. So tea makes me think of mornings, that makes me think of breakfast, makes me think of cereal, makes me think of milk, what you were doing earlier. But if we hone that back down a little bit, we can just do word associations. We're going to do 2 rounds of this.
Okay.
The first word association is called A to B word association. You say a word, I say a word. There's no wrong answer. If it comes out as a sound, as a thing, but the idea is you go as quick as you can so that you can't start to judge yourself.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah? Okay, you can begin whenever you're ready.
Okay. Shoe.
Lace.
Buckle.
Belt.
Fart.
Noise.
Bum.
Fun.
Cheeks.
The pig.
Oh, tail.
Curly.
Wiggle.
Dance.
Shake.
Okay, good. Fantastic. So what happened to both of us is we both ended up in some kind of panic because
Yeah.
we're like, oh, we tensed up. We like looked to the sky. We look around.
Mhm.
Let it go.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's do one more quick round like this and see how fast we can go, and then I'll go to the second level of the game.
Oh gosh. Okay.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
Okay. Hat,
Head.
lice,
Mice.
mouse,
Hole.
bum,
Cheeks.
naughty.
Cheeky.
Okay,
Oh,
good,
I'm
good,
going
good,
to
good,
obsessed
good.
with cheeks.
That's all right. That's why it's interesting. Okay,
All
so
of our things go to bum.
everything. Like with the name of today's podcast, everything ends in bum.
Everything's in bum.
So this time, to make it even more, that's kind of convergent thinking, right? The idea of coming to like a one-word solution.
Mhm.
This time, you're going to do A to C.
Okay.
So you're going to think of one word in your mind and then go to the other one. So this way the idea is that we don't stay in the same kind of realm of like linear thinking 1, 2, 3, 4, because you'll think of one in your mind and you'll say the next one. So the idea is that it becomes a much more wider scattergun kind of net of ideas in a much quicker time.
Okay. So, for example, if I think of whole, I think
Then
of
you associate that in your own mind. You inspire yourself.
ground.
Great. You think ground, and then you give me the word inspired by ground.
Oh, solid.
Great. So then on the outside, it goes from whole to solid.
Oh, so I jump B
You-
and C. So
you-
A, B,
you-
C.
So you jump B. You think B, but you just tell me C.
Okay. Okay, let's give it a go.
We'll give it a go.
We'll give it a go.
Makes sense?
No.
Okay, great.
No. I think it does. So say like you give me a word.
So I'm going to give
I'll
you
do
the
it out
word mustache.
Face, but I don't give you face.
Yeah?
I give you person.
Wonderful. Yeah? So you give me person. Portrait.
Gallery.
Croissant.
Fluff.
Sponge. Okay, so we stop there. So it's much trickier.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the idea is that we went from gallery to croissant to fluff, and it's already much wider net that we've created.
Yes.
Right? Instead, the last one was like following a much more easily noticeable pattern.
Yes.
Whereas this is like scattergun. I mean, it's much easier if you're physical.
Yeah.
It's 1,000 times easier to be physical, to be moving, to have emotion, to have your body involved. Sitting here looking at each other is much harder.
Well, that's very interesting you should say that, Kiva, because divergent thinking is really helped by being in motion. So, for example, if you're doing something kind of a bit boring or monotonous, like walking is the classic one, like go for a walk. And how many people have come up with great ideas on walks? Like you walk and you just let your mind wander and think, and you'll come up with lots of different things. Same thing with showering, like shower thoughts, doing the washing up, like anything that's like a monotonous activity that occupies the body kind of releases the mind to sort of think more creatively and divergently. And there have been, again, studies about the power of walking and then how much that increases people's ability to divergently think. So it's really interesting that you say as soon as it's harder to sit here and do it
Way harder.
than to be in movement or to be even be standing. Even if we were standing up doing this, it would be easier to do. And that is follows the kind of research. Like Stanford did a study about this, and they even found standing up people did better than
Isn't it
sitting
funny?
down.
Yeah.
Because we're suddenly engaged the body.
You're active. You're literally in action.
And it takes away that kind of, it loosens the grip of the mind a little bit. So yeah, very much so. Get that body involved, everybody.
Yeah. Play this game with your friends, but do it like what's walking around.
Yeah, go for a nice walk in the countryside.
Yeah.
Or wherever. Or just stand up. Don't be lazy like me and Kiva and sit down. Hey.
I have another question for you.
Okay.
So this is something that I deal with. I have lots of crazy ideas all of the time, and I don't know how to harness them. So sometimes I wake up with an idea, or like you said, in the shower or having a walk or whatever, and I've tried like writing things down on my phone, but then nothing ever comes of it, but I have ideas for movies, for books, things from dreams, things, passing thoughts. And I'm not very good at harnessing that inspiration. If it's in a theatre and it's in an improv scene, great, I'll use it straight away. And I will use improv to use some of those ideas that have come to my head, something that I've read or something that I've thought about. But sometimes that inspiration, I write them down, but then I don't go anywhere with them.
For me, I think what you're saying is the ideas you use in an improv scene are immediate ideas. They're immediate inspiration that is in the immediate moment that you use right then and right there. Whereas when you talk about like I had an inspiration for a movie or a book or something, those are big projects. They're big things that then, yes, you have the inspiration, but then that's a thing you then have to commit to and give time to and give extra nourishment to, basically, for that to come to fruition. So there are two different kinds of inspiration going on there. You obviously have a very brilliant kind of divergent, inspired brain that works very quickly and very fast and is very active and very agile with that. But those ideas are big. And that's probably why they kind of go like, oh, that would be a great movie script. And it sits there. Well, it's there. But then you're like, well, then I have to sit down and write 10 pages of a short script. Or I have to write 120 pages of an hour and 20.
Book. Yeah.
Or this book, or this. I have to write 10,000 words. And that's another leap, and that's another undertaking. So it's lovely to have those ideas. But of course, you can't act on every piece of inspiration you ever receive. But it's nice to acknowledge them. And, there will be one or two that you're like, maybe that will come back in at some point.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like, for me, whenever I get a little thing like that, sometimes I do it on Post-it notes.
Okay.
Sometimes I'll do it in a journal or something like that and stick them in. I do have lots of, like, obviously spreadsheets and things like that. And sometimes I just completely forget the idea.
Yeah.
Like, it'll come in and be like, that's great. And then it'll just disappear.
It's $1 million idea.
Yeah. But I think maybe for you, I think a beautiful, like, book where you stick, like, stickers and Post-its in it, but you'd have to go back and then look through it.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, also, is it or is it not? Is it just a wonderful thing to have this, like, book of ideas and imagine looking at that in 20 years' time and go, there's no context. I don't have to make these things, but these are just ideas that I came up with in 2023.
Yeah, I think that's really exciting.
That's
and also
also cool.
See a great, like, it kind of is a great way to record your sort of history as well, because our inspiration will be influenced by what's happening around us. So you'll go back and be like, oh my God, yeah. And then that will trigger another memory and be like, oh, I was here when this happened. And that was because of this and that sort of thing. Sometimes you'll probably go back and go, no idea why I wrote that.
Yeah.
But it might make you laugh at the time and be like, what? I did what? I love this idea of the inspiration journal.
Yeah.
Like the inspiration book. I think it's gorgeous. There's all these beautiful ideas in there.
And even if they're, just your thoughts
Weird
in
or
that
random,
moment, weird
or
or random, or just not.
And I like the idea that it's not journaling. Like, it's not like written, because I do journaling a lot, but I like the idea it's just like Post-its or like just a scribbled in thing or like a
little line or whatever.
little moment, just like a little brief thought or an idea or an inspiration. I think that's a really beautiful thing.
I like it.
But reviewing it, I think, is an important thing.
Yeah, because I have, when I wake up and I have a crazy dream and I'm like, this could be a movie or this could be a thing or whatever, this is great. And I have either tried to write or audio record myself, and I'll like set up a recording thing on my phone, and then the next day I'll listen to it or I try and read it, and it is nonsense. One, because you're half asleep and you can't do it, but it's like in my head I'm like, this is a movie, I'm going to be a millionaire. And then in reality it's like the spider sat on the table and then the princess, and you're like, what?
But the thing is, like, I think there's space for all that joy and all that fun as well. One thing I'm doing currently, which actually could work for the ideas thing actually, is I have a little glass jar on my desk, and every week I write a little Post-it note of something, a small thing that I'm grateful for. So it's a grateful jar. It can be something tiny, like, had this delicious meal, put it in. Or something, a little moment that inspires you or has made you happy or made you grateful, and you pop it in the jar, and at the end of the year you read them and see all the nice things, that like little things and big things and all the stuff, and so you'll have like at least 52, but you might have more. There's no limit. You can just keep popping them in there. But I'm thinking, even for the ideas jar, you could do it. It can be for anything.
Do you know that you were just so great? No, I don't mean that. I mean it completely sincerely. No. I mean it 100% sincerely. I love that you journal. I love that you do these things. I think it is really inspiring. Hugely, hugely so.
Talking about like divergent thinking in business, is an absolute skill. If you can start bringing that in, because problem solving, thinking differently is what's going to set you apart basically from the crowd. Because lots of people have amazing skills, lots of people have degrees and years of experience and all this sort of stuff. But if you can go in and do something, well, basically say something a bit weird or allow your brain to go to those different places, that can be like gold dust.
Yeah, literally think outside the box.
Yeah.
Like just allow yourself to get out there.
So Kiva, how do you notice when you are feeling inspired or when you've had a moment of inspiration?
I think it's just when it makes you kind of stop for a moment. It doesn't have to necessarily make you stop in your tracks, but it just opens that little door. In my head, I kind of have an advent calendar in my brain. This is the image I have in my brain. And it's like, you got your advent calendar, it's going on, and then a little small other little cardboard door opens and you're like, oh, okay, what's over there? And it might be nothing or it might be something, but I think we can think like, oh, inspiration must be to, like I said before, to create an opera, to make this big, like obra de arte, whatever. But it can just be something really small and just noticing in someone else and going, oh, it's that I think it's that sound. So if I'm going to do a little test with you for a second.
Okay.
So think of a word.
Bread.
Okay. So that is quite a threatening kind of thing. Like, think of a word. I'm like putting you on the spot and it's very difficult. Whereas if I say, think of a word that starts with D.
Yeah, dog.
Yeah, almost instant. Or if I say, think of a feeling that you feel on Christmas Day.
Happy.
Great. So it's much easier if you get given that limitation. So sometimes with improv games, we think, oh, but why are we doing this? Why is this limitation? And it's like, it just helps you to unlock that bit of your brain. Go make up a story is really difficult. Whereas if I say make up a story based on that happy dog, you have 1,000 ideas. Right?
It's strange you say this again, Kiva, because one of the big things of divergent thinking is putting limits on your thinking.
Oh my God,
working within limits. It really pushes people. One of the things that really helps divergent thinking is creative constraint. So putting time, things like time limits on stuff. Like one of the things you can play is a Pictionary style thing to increase your divergent thinking or your creative thinking is you set a little timer and you have 20 seconds to draw something. Go. So you're not judging it. You're just allowing whatever comes out to come out. And I always say this one, the shark doesn't work. And this is to do with Jaws. So an amazing film. Steven Spielberg wanted this big animatronic shark. Like wanted to film with the shark, have the shark much more featured. But the animatronic came and he was like, oh no, this just looks rubbish. What are we going to do? So again, they're limited here. The shark isn't good enough to really scare people. So what do you have? You have 2 floating barrels. And I've never been more scared of 2 floating barrels moving towards a boat because we just know it's built up what's under there. This big monster is under there. And by the time we do see the shark at the end, and it's not the best shark in the world, we're so terrified that we don't really mind. And he knows that. He knows at this point. But it's just an amazing way that they've just thought creatively of like, how can we signal the shark is there without actually showing the shark?
And 2 notes on a piano.
I know.
Do.
Exactly.
That's it. It's 2 notes and 2 barrels.
Oh, it just like gave me a shiver.
Yeah, right.
Because the mind is inspired to create this whole thing under the water that we can't see from this little bit of inspiration, this little nudge to be like, there's 2 barrels there. So what's underneath it?
Yeah.
And what's coming.
We create the threat. We create the thing.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And it is that thing, when constraint is there, brilliant things happen that create things that are more intense and rely on what humans do brilliantly, which is imagination.
I did an exercise once. I got to a workshop and there were maybe 20 people and you had 30 seconds and you had to look at the person in the eyes and without looking at the paper, draw that person in 30 seconds. And then at the end, you got given, 15 pictures of yourself of what they had seen, what they had been inspired by you, what they had captured, and they were spectacular. If I sat down and said, hey, Rebecca, can you draw me? You would probably get into, well, you did it with your face there. You get into like, oh God, they're going to judge me. I want to make sure they look beautiful. I want to make sure they look powerful, strong, whatever it might be. Whereas just allowing that free form, like stream of consciousness inspiration, it's like, and everything is going to be joyful at the end of that.
Oh, that's so beautiful.
It was so good.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Allow it to flow.
Yeah, not overthink it. That is exactly it. Then it is just the genuine, just letting the inspiration flow through you and out through your page in whatever way, in the song, in the dance, in whatever it might be. That is the end of Let's See It today. We were talking all about inspiration. We hope that we inspired you. Today's episode is being edited by our wonderful friend Blanca. So thank you very much, Blanca, for helping us out. Yay.
Thank you, Blanca.
Legend. Thank you very much for listening. Please like and subscribe. And we hope that today you enjoyed being inspired, because you guys inspire us. And we are just full of inspiration and we are delighted to be here. So it's bye from me and bye from
me.
Look at that. Perfect.
Bye.
Bye.